You're listening to the Sticks in the Six podcast. Here are your co-hosts, Andrew Forbes, Peter Barricini, and Alex Hobson.
Good afternoon and welcome to episode 178 of Sticks in the Six, brought to you by the fine folks at the Indie Ale House. And we can say that once again because we got some good news coming over the next couple of weeks here. I know I've been teasing this a lot lately.
Absolutely.
We got to work through all the logistics before we can actually announce what's taking place. But there is exciting news coming to the Sticks in the Six podcast. We're going to get to all of that in just a sec. But Peter, before we do, how you doing this week, my friend?
Doing great, man. It's actually kind of surprising how quick October flew by. I mean, it kind of feels like hockey just started. Like we're already like 2-3 weeks in. Halloween's already done. By the way, I saw the little updates that you were given on social media about, you know, the dad tax and everything like that. It was back in full swing again. Yeah, you know, it's going great. I mean, you know, obviously with Halloween, I've been watching horror movies nonstop. It's actually at the end, so I got my fix for a full year until next year. And you know what? It's just kind of crazy how it's already November right now. We're already 1 month into the season. Halloween's done. Christmas is just around the corner, basically. So it's like I kind of want time to stop a little bit right now, you know. But guess it can't happen.
Complete insanity. Complete insanity is the way I look at it. October is finished. We're coming up on Remembrance Day, and before you know it, it's going to be Christmas is going to be here. We're going to be halfway through the NHL season. We wait all these months to kick off the NHL season. Now we're 10 games into the year, and we're already looking at the fact that it's November. It's insanity. It's insanity. But I know I look like I just woke up. I had a tough time putting the daughter down for an afternoon nap. Halloween was fantastic. The kids had a great time. Oakley pulled in more candy than I could have even imagined. You know, those reusable like shopping bags. He's got a full. He was coming. I brought the wagon. I was smart this time. I brought the wagon, had the dump bag in there, so he'd come back and dump it in. Left out the travel mugs this year because Sarah my wife was a little bit further behind us with Harlow, so. You know, there was a little separation there, but next year I feel like the travel mugs are coming out, the cooler's coming out, and we got the wagon full of the adult treats as well. But outside of that, it was a good night. We do have, like I said, we do have some great news. Obviously, as you can see, our up top and at the bottom there, we're getting a little filled up with ads and sponsorships, which is a fantastic thing. It is a good thing. You're gonna hear a lot more of my voice just reeling off, you know, ad after ad, but it's a good thing. We have been teasing it for a while. The Indie Ale House is back on board with the Sticks in the Six podcast for season 5. We will have some more exciting news along with that partnership coming up, but for the time being, just stay tuned. Hopefully in the next month or so, we'll be able to kind of report that news. You know, stay tuned on the socials as well. It'll probably be on there prior to us talking about it on the show. But so they are back. Shout out to Indie Ale House. We'll have an ad read again for them, and hopefully some holiday codes as well for the upcoming holidays for ordering online and at the bottle shop. Raycon is back along with the Hockey Podcast Network, so that's also good news. But best of all, guys, and I really hope we can get your support here, is that we are back as a nominee for the best hockey podcast with the Sports Podcast Awards. This will be the third time running that we are in for the award. We were a final, I think it was a final 5 in year 1.
Been a finalist the last few seasons. We've been up there. We've been up there. Fallen just short, but we've been up there.
Absolutely. And shout out to Ladies Talking Leafs. Yes, they were a finalist. They were top 3 finalists last year as well. So let's get some more Leaf content in there. Let's get the Sticks in the Six podcast back up there. And if you haven't seen it before, you can check us out on IMDb, where our nomination is as well. Thanks to Peter for finding that one.
Honestly, I can't believe I found that. I was just scrolling through one day, and I'm just like, you know what? Not to be like, you know, so self-veiny kind of thing or whatever, but like I'm like, let's just put on the Google machine Six in the Six podcast. Let's see what comes up. all of a sudden I just see IMDb with the podcast, and I'm just like, wait, hold up. So we're listed on there. We may not be A-list actors, but you know what? For us to be on IMDb, that's absolutely a big step. So you know what? Yeah, I can't believe I actually found that.
Hey, anybody who knows how to get your photo up on IMDb, let's get these ugly mugs
Yeah.
up on there. Anyways, enough with that. Keep supporting us. We appreciate your support. If you're watching today, we appreciate that as well. Tuning in on a Wednesday afternoon. That's always our Friday afternoon. What day is it? Friday.
Yeah. What
Friday
day is it?
afternoon.
We don't even know.
Man,
I mean, you know what? With Halloween happening, you know what?
With how quick everything's going by, man, I just lose track of my days.
Oh,
I'm
totally.
getting older. Remember, I'm getting older. I'm starting to lose track of my memory as well. But
absolutely, man. I hear you.
anyways, we do have some great Leafs content coming in this week. Obviously, some signings, some trades, some movement on the roster, some negotiations with a young cat like Matthew Knies. Before we get into all that, I want to talk about one of the biggest wins this week, and it was against the Winnipeg Jets. And the reason I want to talk about that is because ever since it was Mark Scheifele, it was Logan Stanley or Mark Scheifele, one of them said as they were walking off, it was Scheifele after the win, and he says, there's nothing better than beating the Leafs. And ever since then, the Leafs are undefeated against the Winnipeg Jets. The Jets went into the game undefeated on the season, and might I add, my future pick for the Stanley Cup this season. They paid 27-1 prior to the season, so I had to put a waiver on them.
That train.
But the Leafs go in there, and the Leafs just hammered them, and they hammered them good. They looked solid. They kind of let up a little bit at the end, but the Leafs continued their winning ways against the Winnipeg Jets. Peter, what'd you see?
Man, thank you, Mark Scheifele, for the bulletin material, basically, right there. I mean, it basically says it all, right? I mean, listen, everyone has it out for the Leafs. They want to beat them. I get it. But when you do something like that, that's just going to fuel and motivate a team even more. I get it's only the regular season, and everyone's going to chirp about the Maple Leafs. Oh, yeah, they 6-0 against the Winnipeg Jets during the regular season. Let's see it in the playoffs. Well, yes, the Maple Leafs haven't been hot, but neither of the Winnipeg Jets in the postseason. Kind of like the Western Conference version of the Leafs, where they have that offense, they have that power. Connor Hellebuyck goes invisible most of the time during the postseason. I kind of digress a little bit right there, but the overall game was just absolutely phenomenal. They were dominant for 40 minutes. Kind of got away from there with the power play goals against, PK. That was the one game where the PK didn't look on par. They were out of sorts. But overall, they managed to come out on top. That second line of Pacioretty, Tavares, Nylander was absolutely dynamic. I wrote a post about that, how it was only one game, but I wanted to see a little bit more. And we saw a better glimpse of that against the Seattle Kraken, where they were once again a dominant force, with Nylander scoring 2, Tavares with, 2 really fantastic assists, especially one on his knees, finding Nylander on the side. Patches was an absolute force physically. It just seemed like that line in those 2 games was absolutely great, and it kind of gave them a little push and a little bit of a jolt, because it kind of seemed like the top line was the only one really doing anything. But the fact that they took charge against the Jets, they actually outmatched the Jets' top line overall, which is fantastic, because even Berube was lauding their defensive play against their top line, which is great to see. And the numbers basically said it. They dominated possession, the scoring chances, the shot attempts, everything. It was all in their favor. And even last night, too, against the Kraken. I mean, just an absolute clinic from the second line. I mean, you want to see that intensity every single time. Tavares, I think, maybe with the captaincy not weighing on his shoulder, maybe a little bit of a decreased role every now and then. He seems like a man on a mission this whole entire season. From the first game till now, it seems like he's found an extra gear, and with the line mates that he has, it's just absolutely fantastic to see. Pacioretty's fitting in well, even though he was in the bottom 6 for most of the start of the season. It was only a matter of time before he started to move his way up, and he's really fantastic, or looking fantastic right now. And William Nylander is just, Willie Styles, baby. I mean, you really can't argue anything of what he's done this season. Yeah, a couple of bad reads, bad decision makings here and there. Berube, I know, laid into him on the bench against the Kraken, where it's kind of like, hey, you want more minutes? You said you wanted more minutes. You got to be a little bit smarter, and I get that. But to this point, he's been one of their top point producers. So that line itself, starting with the game against the Jets, was fantastic. I really thought that, it was a complete defensive effort against the Jets. Another one against the Kraken. You had 2 strong back-to-back games after you went 3 with questionable outings, especially in that Boston game where you had Matthews tie the game up and then kind of make that bad decision with the bank pass to nobody and then it leads to the game-winning goal. Hopefully these last 2 games is a turnaround for what we're about to see in the coming months, because usually November is when they turn it on, and this could be a precursor to that.
Yeah, I mean, early season streaking, right? Like that's kind of what we're used to the last couple of years. That's why you see a lot of the guys who cover the teams, a lot of the beat writers come out and say, it's not time to worry yet. And early October, late October, it's not time to worry yet. Unless, of course, you're the Edmonton Oilers. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the show. But it's that early season kind of playing with your roster, seeing who you've got, seeing what you've got, and making the moves you need to make. And the Leafs are in that position right now. It's a benefit to have that, to know that you can make those moves, to know that you've got a lot of roster positioning that you can kind of play with. It's also a bit of a pain in the ass too, right? Because you're trying to find the chemistry that works. You mentioned Tavares, Nylander, and Pacioretty. I mean, they've looked incredible over the last couple of games. Obviously, the Leafs lose 3 in a row to Columbus, St. Louis, and then of OT to Boston. They come back with 2 big wins against 2 tougher Western Conference teams in the Winnipeg Jets and Seattle Kraken. And still, I mean, aside from the 4-goal game against Winnipeg, Stolarz has looked good. Mm-hmm. Joseph Woll's looked decent. And I think, there's a little bit more confidence being put into these players. We talked about this a couple weeks ago with Nick Kiprio saying that Joseph Woll needed to earn the trust of his teammates. And I called bullshit on that right away. I said, there's no way that you're going in and saying that this young goaltender, who has proven himself in the small sample size that he has, needs to go out and earn the trust back of his teammates. The guy's suffered injuries. That's out of his control. He's come back. He's fought back. He's playing well. He looks mobile, which is what you want from your goaltender. And if that means he missed an extra couple of games to get to the level that he needed to be at, I think that's what they need to look at. They know what they have now in the system. I mean, Akhtiamov right now at the AHL is undefeated. You've got Dennis Hildeby, who went back and had a 32 save performance on 34 shots. And then, of course, Matt Murray, who is Matt Murray, and he's always going to give you his best effort as well, aside from his injury proneness. But all in all, I mean, this team has played well. They've had some duds. Obviously, the Columbus game is one that we look back at. But you need to have those turning points. We started the year off with new players, new chemistry. You've got Austin Matthews, a new captain, coming in and kind of setting the tone from his point of view now. You got John Tavares, as you mentioned, taking that step back. There's a lot of fixtures here that have changed, and this organization, you got a new head coach, you got a new system, you got a new power play. Everything is new PK. Everything's changing, and I think given the month that they had, sitting where they are, top 3 in the Atlantic, it's exactly what you want.
Yeah. 6-4-1. Why not?
Yeah, it's exactly what you want. You're coming out of the first month of the season with a winning record. And as you mentioned, historically, November's been a pretty good month for the Leafs. So I think right now, to sit back and judge the Leafs and say, they're not where they need to be, maybe not. It's the first month of the season, but let's sit back and wait and see what happens.
Let's not forget too that there's been a lot more competition throughout the league this whole entire season, where it's not just
a lot of parity.
It's not just your heavy hitters or the teams that you expect to win are winning. I mean, Atlantic is very competitive. I mean, Boston's in last place in the division right now. I don't think any of us expected that, where they have 9 points.
Maybe not expected it, but we should go back to our preseason conversation where somebody here talked about culture in the room and how it's changed and how the Boston Bruins are not going to be a playoff team this year.
Yeah.
So write that down, remember it, because right here on the Sticks on the Six podcast, we determined that the Boston Bruins were not going to be a playoff team.
Anyways, exactly. Continue. And Yeah, you're looking at basically 6 points separate 8th and 1st place in the Atlantic, but right now you're starting to see that division kind of break away. I mean, we kind of called the Pittsburgh Penguins not being great, but you look at teams like, the Colorado Avalanche, Edmonton Oilers, again, we're going to get to in a bit, where they've had their own struggles to start the season, and it's not just a team like the Toronto Maple Leafs where the expectations are going to be for them a little bit different than, let's say, a Colorado or Edmonton, but to have a positive winning record first month into the season when it hasn't been kind to them in the past, again, we'll take that any day of the week.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think jumping into the next topic here is the month of November. We talked about how hot the Leafs have been historically in the month of November. This is going to be a real test for them. And I think looking ahead, you've got tough Western Conference competition in St. Louis and Minnesota. You go on to play Boston again, who, yes, they are at the bottom of the division. Still a very tough team. Jeremy Swayman's still trying to get his groove back after missing the entire preseason. And then you've got some that you should win, but we know how that falls for Toronto. In Detroit and Montreal, you got Ottawa, you've got Washington, who's off to a decent start. Mm-hmm. Then you have the Edmonton Oilers, whether McDavid's there or not. That remains to be seen. And then you've got some more tough competition. You're up against Vegas, Utah, Florida, and Tampa Bay to close out the month of November. So it's gonna be a real test. And I think that's where Leaf fans need to come in and look at it and say, okay, now we're 2 months into the season. How do we stack up against some of the best teams in the NHL? And I think November is going to give you a real taste of what to expect from this team moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yeah. And, in the past, you see them demolish their competition, whether it was a top-seeded team or a team lower in the standings. I know that whole playing down the competition thing has come down into the past, but, you've seen Marner elevate his game. You've seen Matthews go on a hot goal-scoring stretch during this month as well. The way that the second line is playing, you want to see that where the way that you got a little bit more secondary and depth scoring, hopefully that could take another big step. But you just mentioned off the teams right there. Most of them are, pretty much in a battle or in, I don't want to say a playoff spot 2 months into the season, but they're at the top of their division or in the middle part of that division right there. So, yes, you have some of those teams like Montreal and Detroit that, again, you can't take lightly, but hopefully that game, the first game against Montreal, the Maple Leafs had the fact that they were the better team for the full 60 minutes. Hopefully they could use that to their advantage and solve multiple or whoever's in goal that game. Vegas is off to a hot start. I mean, I think they've had some hiccups here and there, but not as much as everyone else. I mean, you got to try and find a way to contain that top line, especially Mark Stone, who's off to a fantastic start.
Leading the league right now in points. But we'd all know that's going to change when he goes out with a back injury late in the season.
Yep. Or if anybody else is going to, circumvent the cap on the the Vegas Golden Knights, but Jack Eichel's looked good. Their defense looks strong. Shea Theodore's coming off signing that new contract, and their defense is looking very stellar. Again, the big question mark is going to be that Edmonton Oilers game. I mean, not necessarily it's going to be a measuring stick game, but if McDavid's not playing, can you basically add to their early season struggles where defense hasn't been great? You're only relying on, or not necessarily so much. I'm going to have to look at the depths or the scoring chart for the Oilers right now. But it looks like McDavid and Draisaitl were the only ones. I mean, basically 1-2 in scoring. Matthias Ekholm, Bouchard after that. But, Skinner with 5 points, Nugent Hopkins with 4. Zach Hyman only has 2 points. He just got his first goal recently, 10 games into the season. Mm-hmm. How are they going to fare when McDavid is out? Their defense took a big step back. You don't have two of your young prospects in Broberg and Holloway. Stuart Skinner has not looked great at all. Like, he's given up a lot of goals against. I mean, it's just absolutely phenomenal how he's able to take that step back, given how he was able to lead that team as well and go to the final game of the Stanley Cup final. So that's going to be a big question mark for not necessarily the Oilers, but for the Leafs as well. Is like, can you take advantage of their bad situation? They already did with the Kraken where they were out. Brandon Montour, shout out to Papa Brandon Montour as well. Vince Dunn was out of the lineup as well. So they were out two of their top defenders, but they took that situation and used it to their advantage. That's what the Maple Leafs need to do, and they need to do that consistently because they can't take any team lightly right now with how important and valuable points are going to be with how close teams are breathing down your neck right now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And since you brought it up anyways, we're going to talk about Edmonton. I was going to wait till after we did all of our Leaf talk, but since you brought it up.
Yeah, we can do a little bit.
It's just more of a question. Is this right now, you're 2 weeks out with Edmonton, with Austin Matthews, at least 2 weeks, possibly 3. I say Austin Matthews, I meant Connor McDavid.
Connor McDavid, yeah.
Connor McDavid. I'm stuck on my Leaf talk. I'm stuck on my Leaf talk right now.
It's all good.
You're 2 to 3 weeks without Connor McDavid. Is this the most important stretch of the season for the Edmonton Oilers right now, considering that they were off to a slower start, considering that there was a lot of pressure and expectation put onto them this season, and considering that now you've got McDavid, arguably the best player in the NHL at the moment, not in the lineup for the next 2 to 3 weeks? Is this do or die for the Edmonton Oilers?
You don't want to say it's a make or break point in the season this early, but considering how poor of a start they've already gotten off to, and given how your captain, franchise player, and like you mentioned, top player in the league is out 2 to 3 weeks, which it probably could have been a hell of a lot worse. I think they were avoiding, anything longer than 4 to 6. They did. They got something a little bit shorter, which is great to see. But at the same time, 2 to 3 weeks without Connor McDavid literally is going to feel like a lifetime for them because they just want him to get back into the lineup because of how important he is, how much of a catalyst he is offensively. And, it's now basically on for everybody else in that room to take a step up. You signed Leon Draisaitl out of that contract. Obviously you're going to see some production from him, but it's everyone else that falls behind him. What can you get more from Zach Hyman at this point, who's off to a slow start? I kind of figured that maybe he would regress a little bit, maybe not this much. Again, the defense seems very, very inconsistent and unreliable at this point where, aside from Ekholm and Bouchard, your second and third pairings or, other players on your lineup aren't having that same consistency or that same impact as you would hope for them to have. So there's a lot of what-if scenarios that need to go right for the Oilers. They need Stuart Skinner to show up. They need their defense to be a little bit better. And they need more players to step up in McDavid's absence because I know last year, even with McDavid was in the lineup, you still had decent secondary scoring, but you don't quite have that right now. So that to me is going to be compounded where if they can't get that going within his absence, by the time he comes back, I don't want to say it's too little too late because we saw what happened with the St. Louis Blues when they were completely at the bottom of the standings, rose up and won the Stanley Cup. But it is going to be a very tough hole for the Edmonton Oilers to come out of if, in fact, they continue to lose games. The main issues remain, and, a lot of people that picked the Edmonton Oilers as a Stanley Cup, not necessarily hitting the panic button, but if they're going to be further down the standings right now, that is going to be a little bit of cause for concern right there because of how impactful one injury to one player can be, given the fact that they were already inconsistent heading into this stretch already.
Well, perfect segue to a quick word from our sponsors over at DraftKings Sportsbook. Those of you who did pick Edmonton, I do apologize, but they're in for a tough one here.
It's not too late, though.
It's not too late. It's not too late. But the quest for the Stanley Cup starts now. The puck's dropping on the 24-25 season. Get in on all the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NHL. It's super easy for first-timers to get started. Try betting on something simple like picking a team to win. Go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app, select your team, and place your first bet. As I mentioned off the top of the show, I took the Winnipeg Jets to win the Cup as a futures, 27-1 odds. Not bad when you're throwing a little tenor on it. And if you are new to DraftKings, listen up. New customers bet $5 to get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use code THPN. That's code THPN for new customers to get $200 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings, the crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly on behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort, Kansas. 21 plus age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Bonus bets expire 186 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/ice. Copyright NHL 2024. All rights are reserved. Now, some big news for the Leafs this past week was that Jake McCabe signed a 5-year extension. We knew it was in the works. We knew he wanted to stay in Toronto. The question mark was the dollar amount, and they were able to get it done for $4.51 million. 5 years more of Jake McCabe. Peter, what are your thoughts on this deal?
I mean, considering that maybe there was the possibility that it could have been upwards of $5 million, I think getting it around like this was the perfect range. I think this was his contract when he had with the Chicago Blackhawks when the Maple Leafs acquired him, but they had to retain some salary because they're already tight with the cap. So to me, this is very fitting that he was able to re-earn the money that he had, playing top 4 minutes, playing in the top 4, and being a consistent top 4 defender, production-wise, defensively. He's been doing it all right now, and I think this is great value for the defenseman that you have right now. And again, everyone's going to probably talk about, the aging curve, how the Maple Leafs defense are over 30 right now. You signed another guy to that kind of money. But to me, it seems like there's no rust. There's really no injury concern with McCabe right now where you can afford to it's not necessarily the money that's the issue, but a little bit more of that term where it's the 5th year. I think that's not an issue. It probably would have been an issue if you're looking at someone a little bit older like a Chris Tanev. But I really think overall this is a great deal for the Maple Leafs. I mean, they locked one of their key defenders in. He's looked really great to start the season. And even looking at the defensive pairings right now on Natural Stat Trick, where you look at the defensive pairs, when he was with OEL, 58% of the shot attempts that he's had, 66 goals for percentage, scoring chances were at 57, 64% with high danger chances when he was with OEL, and even playing with Chris Tanev as well. The numbers are still there where shot attempts just over 57%, goals for is a little bit better, 71%, scoring chances 63, high danger chances close to 58%. No matter who he's playing with, whether it's in the top 4, whether it's, the newly acquired McCabe, Tanev or Ekman-Larsson, McCabe has been playing well basically with everybody that he's been with. And obviously you're going to see some numbers are a little bit inflated where it's like, he played with Philip Myers for like 3 seconds. Sorry, no, that's the wrong one. He's played Philip Myers for 2 minutes, Timothy Liljegren with 11 seconds. Obviously that is a very, very small sample. You can't build anything off that. But where he's into the lineup, where he's playing with other players, and even with Morgan Rielly too, numbers are kind of a little bit off, just under the league average, but still a little bit decent overall, where some are at 50%. But playing with someone like it kind of seems like the chemistry with Tanev and OEL are there with McCabe, where he's able to still maintain that two-way game, but also he has players and he can be a defensive stalwart as well, where he has someone else to rely on him as a defensive partner in both situations. So I really like the contract. I really thought that even the deferred salary, giving it to him towards the end of his contract, a little bit helped out. We saw that with the Seth Jarvis contract, how, teams may start to utilize doing that a little bit more, especially with older players. Maple Leafs took advantage of that with McCabe, and obviously both sides came to an agreement with there where, he would take some money towards the end after when the contract is done, which kind of makes up for everything that with the deferred money that he could have made during the contract. So you know what? I'm happy overall with the term, the money, and just basically the impact that he's had, because you know what? Ever since Jake Muzzin left, Jake McCabe easily is that kind of replacement type player as a Jake Muzzin. And the production is starting to show up a little bit right now, whereas, he's probably good for 20, 25, 30 points. But the minutes that he can eat, the defensive impact that he has, it's just basically irreplaceable at this point.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think you nailed everything. I think he's kind of that fill-in. We saw it last season. I wrote a piece about, how I think the Leafs got him on the right deal.
Yeah.
And you saw with the bruises and the black eye and the blood and all that as he was going through their playoff run and the tail end of the season there. This guy is willing to lay it all out on the line, and that's the kind of guy that you need on the back end. You see that now with Tanev as well. Chris Tanev's playing that same sort of mentality. A guy like OEL has kind of fit into a little bit more of a physical role, even though he was an offensive defenseman early on in his career. And you're getting a little bit of that more stability on the back end, and McCabe's kind of that leader that's been there for the last couple of seasons and kind of felt out this team, felt out this market, and I think he fits in well with it. And I mean, you're talking about a guy who played in Buffalo. He's a guy who played in Chicago. He played in, Original Six and high media availability markets like Buffalo. So I think when you look at that, I think you can see why he's a guy that can certainly fit into the Toronto market. He can add that little bit of offense. He's got a booming shot from the point, but for $4.5 million, I think when you look at the defensive market the way it was this offseason, $4.5 million really isn't a lot, especially in a cap era where the cap is on the rise, and we're going to see that over the next 5 years. This is going to look minimal by the end of this contract, and at that point, they'll be able to kind of move it if necessary, or just kind of buy it out if necessary as well. I mean, given the guy's going to be in his mid to late 30s. So definitely a good deal. I love it. I think you need a guy like that. You need a stalwart like that. And I think he kind of fits that mold. So I think, it's a perfect contract to get him done. And now you've got him locked up for 5 years. I believe there was a tweet. I forget who put it out there. It might've been Luke Fox from Sportsnet. You've got OEL, Tanev, Riley, and now McCabe locked up for the next 5 seasons, all coming in at about $19.5 million. So your top 4, for argument's sake, let's call them the top 4. Your top 4 is locked up for the next 4 to 5 seasons at $19.5 million on a cap that's going to continue to increase. It's not a bad situation to be in.
Not at all.
Albeit Riley's the youngest at 30 years old, but look at it from whatever standpoint you want. I think it's a good situation to be in.
And you mentioned that, given where the defensive market was going in the offseason, you have to think that McCabe at this price is very, very valuable. I mean, you look at how Joel Edmondson just signed for $3.8 million. You look at Matt Roy, 5.75. I mean, listen, I was a big Matt Roy fan. I was hoping that the Maple Leafs would sign him, but close to $6 million for that. Basically, if Joel Edmondson is worth close to 4 and Matt Roy is worth close to $6 million, which I don't buy, having Jake McCabe at that value, I will take any day of the week at that range, because that to me is very fair for what he is. And given how other defensemen may have gotten a little bit more over what the market was, he got what he was worth, which is very great to see.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Going off of that, I think knowing now where the defensive future of this team looks like going forward, it kind of shifted the focus onto Timothy Liljegren. And you and I have discussed it. We discussed it when Alex was on the show that, Timothy Liljegren, we're not set on moving on from him. How many times do you have a guy that you've drafted and developed, and we talked about it with goaltending as well. This organization maybe needs to look at the overall development of some of their assets. Right now, the only defenseman on the team that was drafted and developed through the Leafs roster is Morgan Riley. Timothy Liljegren was there, obviously. We all know if you're living under a rock, Timothy Liljegren was traded to the San Jose Sharks for Matt Benning, a 3rd-round pick this year in 2025 and a 6th-round pick in 2026. I want to get your thoughts on them moving on from him, knowing very well that they do get $3 million in cap space.
Yeah, it's such a bittersweet ending, because you wanted, like you mentioned, we were all in Timothy Liljegren's corner to start. Ever since basically we started this podcast and we talked about Liljegren, giving him more opportunities with Justin Hull going, this was a perfect opportunity for him to grow. We wanted to see him grow and be a top 4 defender. he just really never found the right footing, because every single time there was an opportunity, he didn't really quite move the needle to try and take advantage of that, which forced them to go out and sign, experienced defenders, acquire experienced defenders, kind of like a Jake McCabe, kind of like an Oliver Ekman-Larsson, to fill out that right side, basically. So the writing was on the wall from him, and obviously everyone was a little bit skeptical. Why are you giving $3 million to Liljegren? But I think right now they just wanted him signed. And now, going into camp, given how he didn't have the strongest preseason, given how Berube said he needed more from him, he needed to simplify things, adjust to the style of play. He just really didn't quite cut it out. And even in that one game that he played, he did not look great at all. Again, you probably wanted to give him more ice time as a result, but when everyone else is playing great and they move ahead of him and you already have your defensive core already set, why would you want to mess with that? I totally get it, but at the same time, he needed his opportunity. So going to San Jose on a team where they're rebuilding, they don't have a lot of defense or a lot of highly skilled puck-moving defenders like Liljegren, it's an opportunity for him to get into the role that he's always wanted and try to excel with that. But with the Maple Leafs too, there just wasn't a spot for him. And looking at the trade earlier when Utah acquired Olli Mata, I was kind of surprised, given that was the package that was used to acquire him. And then you look at what was used to get, or the return for Liljegren. I'm surprised they got what they did, because he only played in one game. A third round pick is a great value, especially in this year's draft where, third and fourth round picks are basically those rounds where if you hit money, that pick is going to be very, very valuable. A 6th round pick is always great too. Matt Benning is a depth defender that could be in that 6 to 8 role, but a little bit of a cheaper cap hit of what you expect a Liljegren to have, but more of a defensive shutdown presence. So overall, I think it was a great trade for the Maple Leafs. It was a great opportunity for Liljegren. I even did in my recap. It's one that benefits both sides at this point, because Liljegren gets his opportunity. Leafs move on from that contract. They get more space, but they get great value in return for what he did, or playing in one game. But it is a bit of a shame to see this is how it came to an end, because, again, going back, we've all been in Liljegren's corner from the very beginning, wanting him to take that next step, because he did have great potential. He just never showed it when that opportunity came up, and I think they just felt it was the right opportunity to move on. And let's not forget that Yanni Hakanpää is on the way back too, so he's already on a conditioning stint with the Toronto Marlies. So the fact that he's on his way back, it just made things a little bit more difficult, given the McCabe extension. Yeah, Hakanpää is coming back with the news that he's on the return. He was just the odd man out.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I think it's interesting because he's coming off what is a career year in terms of his offensive production. 23 points, albeit 3 goals, but 23 points, only 16 penalty minutes, and he played in 55 games. So, I mean, like, he was taking a step. Obviously, he didn't fit into the Berube system, and I think that was the biggest thing.
Let's not forget the playoffs, too, where he didn't barely get any time in the postseason. Like, Sheldon Keefe couldn't rely on him at that point either.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, looking at his career as a Leaf, 197 regular season games, 14 goals, 65 points. Honestly, not a bad stat line considering.
Yeah.
I think they were expecting more of a top 4 defenseman when they took Liljegren in the draft, and he never really developed to that point. Again, it could be the market. It could be the development of within the organization. Maybe this move to San Jose is going to ultimately benefit him the way that it kind of did with Rasmus Sandin as well. It's just interesting because they moved on from Rasmus Sandin. They put their faith in Timothy Liljegren. But with the moves they made this offseason, you knew something was coming. And it's funny because the conversation right now with Matt Benning around the dressing room, as I'm reading on X here, is that, some of the members of the media that are covering the team are already asking him, what is it like knowing that there's a possibility that you could be traded again? And that the value that the Leafs got from the Liljegren trade wasn't necessarily Matt Benning, but more within the draft capital that they got. Yeah. When it comes to Matt Benning, I mean, this is a guy that very well could be traded within the next couple of weeks if the Leafs find a deal that makes sense. You have Hakanpää coming back. You have Timmins. You have Philip Myers. You have depth the biggest conversation going into playoffs all the time is that you need to have more defensive depth because injuries happen, block shots, what have you, more physicality. So it'll be interesting to see what the Leafs do here with Matt Benning. But all in all, I mean, the end of an era for Timothy Liljegren, the start of a new one with getting the opportunity to play in San Jose. And this is a team that is in a full rebuild right now with some very highly skilled players in Will Smith and Macklin Celebrini, along with others coming up as well. So it'll be interesting to see what he can do. He's still a young defenseman, still has a lot of potential, and they have the cap room to kind of play around with that. The Leafs didn't have to retain anything, which is probably one of the biggest takeaways from this deal as well. Before we jump on to the next thing here, just a quick word from our latest sponsors over at Raycon. There's lots of deals coming your way for Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and it's no different at Raycon. Except with Raycon, because with Raycon you get an amazing deal on premium audio every day of the year, but that doesn't mean they're not having any sales for Black Friday, Cyber Monday. Far from it. They're actually doubling down on their amazing value by offering my viewers, or our viewers, up to 30% site-wide. A Black Friday, Cyber Monday deal you'll appreciate every day, Raycon's everyday earbuds, especially if you haven't checked out their latest model, which includes plenty of new features that make them even more of a must-have for any audio lover. For example, they now feature a 32-hour battery life and multi-point connectivity that lets you pair with 2 devices at once. Man, that's a lot of listening you're going to be doing. Raycon's everyday earbuds also come with active noise cancellation. It's a feature that's a must-have for me on long flights or when you're sitting at work on break and just want to listen into something. But one that can be difficult to find at an accessible price point until now. Because that's another thing. Although Raycon's quality rivals some of the biggest names in premium audio, Raycons start at just half the price as the other guys. So they're already an incredible deal even before you factor in their Black Friday offer of up to 30% off site-wide. Raycon's everyday earbuds are also available in a variety of vibrant colors, so you don't have to just have the standard issue white or black earbuds sticking out of your ears. Now's the perfect time to scoop them up if you haven't already. And don't worry, if you're not as impressed as I am, Raycon offers a 30-day happiness guarantee, so you really can't lose. It's time to save big for Black Friday. Go to buyraycon.com/THPN today to get up to 30% off site-wide. That's right, you'll get up to 30% off everything on Raycon's website when you go to buyraycon.com/THPN. What a feature, eh? Listening to 2 different devices at once. I mean,
there you go.
I know multitasking, but multi-listening is something different.
Doesn't get better than that.
I've never tried. You can listen to 2 podcasts at once. You can listen to episode 170 while you listen to episode 178. It sticks in the 6. There you go.
Double the catch-up time, basically, right there.
That's right. That's right. Anyways, jumping back into it, the Matthew Knies contract's the big conversation now for the Leafs, along with the Marner stuff, but we've talked enough about Marner over the last little while, and there's not really any update on that as either. Matthew Knies right now is second on the team in goals behind William Nylander's 8. He's got 6 so far. He's sitting top 10 on the team in points with 11 points. He's playing top line minutes. What are we going to get from Matthew Knies? This contract's going to be out of this world, I think.
I get that we're probably like, this is a little bit premature where we're looking way too early into this, but the Maple Leafs probably should sign him now before, he gets to that, 10 million winger contract kind of thing. I doubt that's going to happen, but it's basically say that a starting point for me would be 5 to 6 million in theory, but with the cap going up, with everything happening right now, basically, and there was a report, and even Jim Parsons, one of our Leaf writers, wrote about this, about the comparables to Knies seeking a contract similar to that of Juraj Slafkovsky and Alexei Lafreniere. That to me may be a little bit rich, but it's one that I could understand because looking at the impact of this season alone, Matthew Knies has better underlying numbers than both players.
Mm-hmm.
He's matching that production where I think both have 7 or 8 points. Knies has 7 right now, granted a few extra games played. The fact that he's playing with top tier line mates, the fact that he's driving possession, the fact that he's basically, running people over, getting by them, establishing an attack very easily. This is the power forward that the Maple Leafs need, and you can't not necessarily afford to lose him because you want to extend him long term. But if it's going to start with a 7, I say just do it. I say get him under contract because he's going to be an important piece, and you've already seen what he's able to accomplish and the steps that he keeps taking from game to game right now. I don't think you should look at using a bridge deal to say, oh, Matt, you know what? You had a good season this year, but we still want to see a little bit more. This is Matthew Knies at his best, and he's going to continue to get better. And you've mentioned plenty of times before, you pay for what you're going to get. We already know what we're getting with Matthew Knies right now. We're going to get a lot more from him. So I think maybe if you get him at $7 million within that same range as Lafreniere or Slavkovsky, when the underlying numbers show that he may be just the better player at this point, why not do it? I initially maybe 5.5 to 6 million would be my guess, but given the cap going up, given how important he's going to be, why not just give him 7 mil?
Yeah, now I'll be the first one to say that I hate this pay for what you're going to get type of deal.
Yeah.
But that being said, I think
in the
long run, if you sign him to a 7-year deal, 8-year deal at, let's say, 5 million per, I think you're going to benefit.
Very valuable.
Yeah, you're going to benefit in 3 to 5 years. Right? Like this guy, and let me stand corrected. He doesn't have 11 points. He's going for the Cy Young. He's got 6 and 1 right now, so 7 points.
Go for that Cy Young award. I don't care.
But I mean, yeah, 7 points in 11 games, playing top line minutes, becoming that power forward that people expected him to be coming out of university or college. This is the Matthew Knies that you expected to get when you drafted him, and I think this has been the best start that he's had so far, albeit he's only been in 2 seasons, but what have you. He's playing up to the expectations of what the organization had when they took him. And I think that's what they have to look at. I agree with you. I think a bridge deal is going to be a big mistake. I think you're going to end up paying him, let's say 2 years at, let's say 3.5, 4 million. And then he's going to come out and he's going to blow you out of the water in 2 years. And he's going to be looking at 7 million. I think if you can sign him now, even to, let's say 7 years at 5.5, I think you'd be laughing if you look back on it in 3 years and say,
to the bank,
this is the guy that we were looking at. This is the guy we wanted, especially if you get Easton Cowan in there and Fraser Minton in there. Now all of a sudden, this is your next core. It's gonna be something if you can get him signed to that deal. So I think that's what the Leafs have to be looking at. Obviously, and I agree with you. Where with Marner, I don't think you sign now. I think you got to wait till the end of the season, see what he does come playoff time. I think Matthew Knies, you sign right now. Yeah. You get a good deal that benefits you and the player, and you get that deal out of the way and done with, so you don't have to even think about it come the offseason.
Even if he comes in at under 7 million too, that's just going to be a big W.
Yeah.
Because if he's going to be a 30, 60 point guy consistently under 7 million with that speed, with that added, with the strength that he has, oh man. That like you said, you'll be taking that to the bank if it's 5.5. You'll still be doing that if it's under 7 million.
And nobody forget, like John Tavares' 11 million is coming off the books at the end of this year. Yep. Whether he resigns or not, it's not going to be for anything more than 3 million. So I think right now is the time that you benefit from that. The caps are climbing, like you mentioned. This is the time to get it done, and they just have to find a way to make it happen. So. Matthew Knies looking at a big payday. I think it's going to be in that $6 to $7 million range. Now, remember, he is very close with Austin Matthews. The little back and forth they have with tennis, and then of course Matthews' empty net goal the other night. Matthew Knies came out and said, "Well, he told me that he mastered geometry because he banked it off the board." So, there is that closeness.
Yeah.
We all know Matthew signed a 5-year deal, so it's going to be interesting to see it. Maybe that kind of ties in. There's some talk between players. You never know, right? But we're not flies on the wall. We're going to kind of hope that we get a 7 to 8 year deal done in the $5 to $5.5 million range, and I think that's definitely something that can benefit both the team and player moving forward. And when he comes out of this contract, this kid's going to be at his prime. So now's the time to get it done. Lastly, in terms of the Leafs talk, Joseph Woll potentially getting the start in St. Louis against his team, his hometown team. Is Joseph Woll ready to kind of take back the starter role from Stolarz, or what are we looking at? Are we looking at a 1A, 1B type of Boston mentality here?
I mean, yeah, that was the idea going in, where it was 1A, 1B. I again, like you said, the whole thing about like Woll needing to win back the fan base, that's just ridiculous. I get injuries suck. I get that he needs to be healthy, but at the same point, it's not like he was bad, having bad numbers, having bad results, and the injuries were there. He was getting good numbers and results. It's just the health hasn't been there. Yeah. So there's one thing that he's doing right, the other he can't control. Like injuries, you can't. I get that, it's frustrating, but he didn't need to win back the fan base because we know what he's capable of. But right now, I think, given the game that he had against Seattle, where maybe he wasn't tested as much, but they had a lot of quality chances, maybe not a big number, but they had good opportunities on Woll, and he stood tall. Why not give him that opportunity to play in his hometown where he hasn't before? I know Mark Masters tweeted out that, they're still looking at the starter role about what's to come for the game against St. Louis, but Berube said, we're always considering those things. They're not the number one most important thing. It is part of the conversation. So they are having this at like, okay, you know what? Woll hasn't played in his hometown before. Let's give him that opportunity kind of thing. And then Mark Masters immediately followed that up. It sounds like he's expecting the start. So there's a good chance where, there's going to be a lot of friends and family for him, a big opportunity, big moment for Woll, given how the season didn't start off as expected, but he
pulls the old Babcock and just benches him with family and friends in the stands.
Oh man, I that'll set up an uproar with the Leafs Nation. I will guarantee that. But to me, Berube is very honest.
Yeah,
he's very honest. He
transparent.
He wouldn't be the kind of coach to do that, or circle back and be like, yeah, I'm going to do this, then I'm not going to do that. He's very straightforward with his players. And the fact that he said, it's not the number one thing, we do have those conversations. That's great. He's not committing to it, but it is something that they're talking about. So to me, I would play Woll. I don't think it hurts. Given the fact that it is his hometown, you always want to see those stories. You always want to see those games. And you know what? It's not so much that I can't remember if Joseph Woll played in the game where they got beat out by St. Louis. I don't think he did. No, it's Stolarz. So it's not to say that you don't want to play Stolarz because St. Louis has already faced him, but with the way that Woll's been playing, he had a good game. Why not reward him for that within his hometown? I think that's a big, big step forward for him, and it will boost his confidence a little bit more because he wants to get back on a strong foot. He's already done that against the Kraken. Give him the opportunity against St. Louis.
Yeah, I could be wrong, but was it not Dennis Hildeby in that St. Louis game? Or was he
I think it was Hildeby in Columbus.
It might have been Hildeby in Columbus. You're right.
I'll go.
Yeah, you're right. It was Hildeby in Columbus. I
know. No, it was Woll in that game against St. Louis. So he did get the loss. So
redemption, baby.
Redemption. So 1, redemption, 2, hometown, 3, reward him with the game. There you go. Those are the 3 points that you should get for rewarding Joseph Woll for that game. But even then, the team in front of him didn't play well. No, so now this is another opportunity to right the wrong that they had with Joseph Woll last game for this one, and hopefully the team shows up and comes out flying against the Blues because they didn't have that going for them last game.
Well, folks, before we get to the last little bit of NHL news, just a quick word from our friends over at Gametime. Are you looking for tickets this holiday season? Maybe you're looking for a gift, or maybe you're looking for something to treat yourself. Why not use Gametime, where you can have the new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. And this is not just about sporting events. You can get comedy, you can get theater, anything on Gametime. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Now, I personally haven't used Gametime, but I sure will be this holiday season. Talk about the super deal and how good it is, as well as the other tiers of deals. Well, Gametime Picks it's a curation that makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. All in pricing. Toggling this feature shows the total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout, like we see on other ticketing sites. As well, it shows you a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you even buy. So you know what to expect when you go in there, unless you've got some big tall guy sitting in front of you that you didn't know was going to be there. Use Gametime and it will credit you with 110% of the difference if there's a lower price that you can find. Otherwise, Gametime makes sure that you are covered. Your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime Picks. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code THPN for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code THPN for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? It's game time. Well, Peter, just a couple of quick notes before we close it out here. I found it interesting. So Rick Westhead obviously is all over like some of the darker side of the game when with all his coverage and whatnot. Darker side of sports, let's call it. Which, kudos to him for always covering that stuff. But we've talked about it before. The famous 5 in London, Ontario, and the sexual assault case that is still taking place in the courts here in London in terms of the 2018 World Junior team. Anyways, one of those players was former Ottawa Senator Alex Formenton, who was playing overseas, then retired from hockey. Now he makes the news again, and this time, I'll read the tweet from Rick Westhead here. Former Senators forward Alex Formenton, one of the 5 one-time NHL players charged by police in London with sexual assault, has filed a $20.5 million lawsuit against player agency Newport Sports and Wade Arnott, his former agent, alleging negligence, breach of contract, and breach of fiduciary duty. Formenton alleges that he suffered income loss for the 2022-23 and 2023-24 NHL seasons, plus future income arising from lost playing time in the NHL because of Arnott and Newport's misconduct. Formenton's allegations have not been tested in court, and Newport and Arnott have not filed a statement of defense. We will keep you posted on what comes from that. I'm not going to deep dive into this. We all know what my opinion is on that, and if you don't, you can go back and listen to previous episodes. But it seems pretty narcissistic to come out now and file a grievance against your former agent for lost wages when, to me, the mistake was made outside of the agency and outside of the agent that's representing you. That said, whether it's narcissism or not, we will keep you updated on what comes of this. Obviously, there will be more to come. And lastly, before we close it out, former Toronto Maple Leaf Ian White was recently on a podcast, a hockey podcast as well, talking about his career, addiction, and anything else that came up. And it was on Slinging the Biscuit. He talked about Babcock and how Babcock ended his career. So just another shot at Babcock and the kind of coach and person he was. I still find it completely ironic that Babcock stood for mental health, and yet he tormented the players that played below him. Again, I'm not going to deep dive into this. If you want to, jump over to Slinging the Biscuit. Make sure you listen to the episode with Ian White. I'm sure he's got a lot of great insight. I always loved Ian White when he played for Toronto. Mm-hmm. I know he had some post-career issues. if there's a day where we can get Ian White on the podcast to talk about his career, I would happily bring that
Absolutely.
guy on, and to talk about his career and playing hockey and playing in Toronto and all that kind of stuff as well. So, Ian White, if you're out there and you're listening, we'd love to have you on Sticks and Six podcast.
Yes.
We stand with you, or we are a players podcast as much as we can be. If you want to, head over there and listen to that episode as well. With that, Peter, you've got a big week at work. Obviously, induction week is coming up Monday, November 11th. Also, Remembrance Day. Make sure you're wearing your poppies. It's November 1st. Get those on. And, outside of that, we look forward to another big week of Maple Leafs hockey. Peter, as I mentioned off the top of the show, we are up for the Sports Podcast Best Hockey Show Award. Make sure once it opens, it has not opened yet, but once it opens, you jump on down there and you vote for the Sticks and the Six podcast. Let's get some Canadian, let's get some indie, let's get some Hockey Podcast Network, let's get some Leafs content in the finalists there. Outside of that, big shout out to the Hockey Podcast Network, DraftKings, Gametime, Raycon, and I always do this. Our good friends, yeah. Up
Indie? Indie
up
House?
yeah.
At least that's what shows up on my screen right there. So
up at
on my
Indie,
top right.
Indie Ale House for the continued support, and for all those that tuned in today. We appreciate all the support. That's all we have for episode 178. Next week will be 179. Until then, go Leafs go.